All right, y'all, welcome to the show. As per usual, I'm playing catch up today. So we're going to talk about Kamala's first big interview on CNN. There's a lot to say about that. We have Israel exploding in protest as 6 hostages were found dead. And then later on in the show, Trump is tweeting about blowjobs. J.D. Vance cannot stop shitting on childless women. We have another clip number 78 of him shitting on childless women. We'll get to, oh my God, wait until you see Trump's new policy positions. The extreme desperation is palpable. It is oozing off of his orange skin. And then Destiny versus a MAGA YouTuber later on. And I honestly think I saw one of the most humiliating debate moments I've ever seen in my life. And by the way, the guy has no idea that it was humiliating because he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know enough. So he just thinks it was like, fine. Anyway, more about that later. Everybody do me a big favor. Please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That helps out massively and it costs you absolutely nothing. And we're trying to get to 10 million subs so we get that sexy 10 million sub plaque. It's a long climb, but you build it one at a time. So hook a brother up with a sub. All right, without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. So Kamala Harris gave her first big interview the other day to CNN's Dana Bash. And I want to go through a bunch of the interview with you, and then we'll talk a little bit about, there's 2 ways I have to view it, right? Number one, how would the normie American voter react watching this? I'll give you that breakdown, and then I'll tell you my personal breakdown and my personal issues with it. But look, truth be told, my personal position on it doesn't really matter much. It's not like all the American voters are synced up to my brain and they have the exact same reaction as I do, right? So we'll talk about that. Then, of course, you know, the right-wing reaction to it is exactly what you'd expect, so we don't need to get much into that. But here we go. Let's kick it off. So first question, of course, is what are you going to do day one? Like, what's your day one agenda? Here we go.
Day one, it's going to be about, 1, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy. I've already laid out a number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue in our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one. What about you?
Well, I'm excited about this agenda, too. As I said, the idea of inspiring America to what can be. And I think many of these things that the vice president's proposing are things that we share in values. And the child tax credit is one we know that reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We did it in Minnesota to have a federal partner in this. Unbelievable, I think, in the impact that we can make.
You talked about, you call it the opportunity economy. You are well aware that right now many Americans are struggling. There's a crisis of affordability. One of your campaign themes is we're not going back. But I wonder what you say to voters who do want to go back when it comes to the economy specifically, because their groceries were less expensive, housing was more affordable when Donald Trump was president.
Well, let's start with the fact that when Joe Biden and I came in office, during the height of a pandemic, we saw over 10 million jobs were lost. People, I mean, literally, we were all tracking the numbers. Hundreds of people a day were dying because of COVID. The economy had crashed. In large part, all of that because of mismanagement by Donald Trump of that crisis. When we came in, our highest priority was to do what we could to rescue America. And today, we know that we have inflation at under 3%. A lot of our policies have led to the reality that America recovered faster than any wealthy nation around the world. But you are right. Prices, in particular for groceries, are still too high. The American people know it, I know it, which is why my agenda includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries. For example, dealing with an issue like price gouging, what we need to do to extend the child tax credit to help young families be able to take care of their children in their most formative years, what we need to do to bring down the cost of housing.
So look, so far, I mean, they're doing a good job so far, right? It's very policy focused. They keep bringing up extending the child tax credit. She brings up her ban on price gouging that she wants to do. Look, I think, okay, there's 2 big things that I think Kamala Harris learned recently that are massively helping her right now running against Donald Trump. Number one, I think she learned from Obama, and you're going to see more on this in a little bit because she's asked a question about identity. She learned from Obama, don't talk about identity. Don't do it. You're a black woman. Everybody knows you're a black woman. That says enough about identity. You don't need to lean into it. In fact, that turns a lot of people off when you lean into it. So she learned that from Obama. Again, you're going to get an amazing moment with that perspective later on. And the other thing, honestly, I think she learned it from Bernie. And I think a bunch of Democratic politicians learned it from Bernie, which is, you know, back in the day, politicians would talk in these very vague way with platitudes and cliches, and they would talk about their value system and, they would integrity and honor and joy. She does lean into joy, to be fair. But what she's doing here and what Tim Walz is doing here is we're going to actually bring up the policies we want to do. We want to ban price gouging. We want to extend the child tax credit. And this is something that I think Bernie ushered in, this idea that you don't need to talk down to Americans. You actually can bring up these specific policy proposals you want to do, and people will understand it, and they will react positively to it. And so far, look, keep it real. She's doing exactly what she has to do. This is exactly what she has to do, and this is definitely more like modern-day Kamala Harris, who's more comfortable in her skin and confident, versus 2020 Kamala Harris running in the primary, where she was sort of flailing and all over the place, and she felt very inauthentic.
Proposal includes what would be a tax credit of $25,000 for first-time home buyers, so they can just have enough to put a down payment on a home, which is part of the American dream and their aspiration, but do it in a way that allows them to actually get on the path to achieving that goal and that dream.
So,
again, policy, specific policy.
You have been vice president for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
The steps that you're talking about now, why haven't you done them already?
Well, first of all, we had to recover as an economy, and we have done that. I'm very proud of the work that we have done that has brought inflation down to less than 3%. The work that we have done to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors. Donald Trump said he was going to do a number of things, including allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Never happened. We did it.
Oh, this interview so far just went from good to great. Because again, right back to policy. Hits Trump because Trump is taking credit for reducing the cost of insulin. And she's saying, no, he didn't do that shit. We did that shit. Now, the reality of the situation is Trump had, ready for this, a voluntary program to reduce the price of insulin. And it only applied to certain Medicare Part D plans. So not remotely near how wide-ranging Kamala and Biden's move was, which is $35 insulin across the board in Medicare. Part B, Part D. You also have the 10 drug prices per year, where it was negotiated for lower prices with the pharmaceutical industry. Now, you could argue, hey, that didn't go far enough. We needed to reduce the price of all the drugs. I 100% agree with that. But the fact of the matter is, the Democratic plan is way more wide-ranging and far-reaching than Trump's plan, but he keeps trying to take credit, and she's setting the record straight here and going, we did way more than you did, and we went way further than you did.
So now, as I travel in the state of Georgia and around our country, the number of seniors that have benefited, I was in Nevada recently, a grandmother who showed me her receipts. And before we capped the cost of insulin for seniors at $35 a month, she was paying hundreds of dollars, up to thousands of dollars a month for her insulin. She's not doing that anymore.
You maintain Bidenomics is a success.
I maintain that when we do the work of bringing down prescription medication for the American people, including capping the cost of the annual cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000, when we do what we did in the first year of being in office to extend the child tax credit so that we cut child poverty in America by over 50%, when we do what we have done to invest in the American people and bringing manufacturing back to the United States so that we created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, bringing business back to America, what we have done to improve the supply chain so we're not relying on foreign governments to supply American families with their basic needs, I'll say that that's good work.
God damn, who is this woman? And what did she do with the old school Kamala Harris? You want to talk about an upgrade? Bro. Wow. How many times have you heard me say on this show, I need Democrats to point out there was a net manufacturing job loss under Trump of 200,000, and under Biden, it was an increase of 800,000. I need you to point that out. I need you to bring up the CHIPS Act. I need you to bring up the infrastructure bill. I need you to bring up the Inflation Reduction Act, because these actually had tremendous effects. And here she is. She just brought up the 800,000 manufacturing job number. Gotta be honest, bro. She's kind of fucking killing it. She's kind of killing it so far. Very, very policy focused.
There's more to do, but that's good work.
I want to get some clarity on where you stand on some key policy issues. Energy is a big one. When you were in Congress, you supported the Green New Deal. And in 2019, you said, quote, there is no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. Fracking, as you know, is a pretty big issue, particularly in your must-win state of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
in 2019, I believe, in a town hall, you said you were asked, would you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking on your first day in office? And you said, there's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So yes. So it changed in that campaign?
In 2020, I made very clear where I stand. We are in 2024, and I've not changed that position, nor will I going forward. I kept my word, and I will keep my word.
What made you change that position at the time?
Well, let's be clear. My values have not changed. I believe it is very important that we take seriously what we must do to guard against what is a clear crisis in terms of the climate. And to do that, we can do what we have accomplished thus far. The Inflation Reduction Act, what we have done to invest, by my calculation, over probably $1 trillion over the next 10 years, investing in a clean energy economy. What we've already done, creating over 300,000 new clean energy jobs. That tells me, from my experience as vice president, we can do it without banning fracking. In fact, Dana, I cast the tie-breaking vote that actually increased leases for fracking as vice president. So I'm very clear about where I stand.
And was there some policy or scientific data that you saw that you said, oh, okay, I get it now?
What I have seen is that we can grow and we can increase a thriving clean energy economy without banning fracking.
So did she flip-flop on that position? She absolutely did. There's no denying that. When she was running in a Democratic primary, she said, I would ban fracking. Then, she got picked to be the vice president. Now she's running for president and she's in favor of fracking. And look, I think the explanation is exactly what everybody thinks it is. She feels like that's going to be viewed as a far left extremist position. It's fodder for Republicans to hit me on it. It probably polls as an unpopular position to ban fracking. So I'm basically just going to flip and say, I'm in favor of fracking. And her voting record thus far, as she lays out, has been pro-fracking. So definitely a flip-flop. But the way she handled that in terms of the way she deflected and pivoted was actually pretty skillful. Basically what she was saying was, no, I'm in favor of fracking, but what I realized is we can still have fracking and also commit to a clean energy future, and we can do the investment in green and renewable technology, and that's what we did. And so while we created 300,000 renewable green energy jobs, we also allowed fracking. So basically, it's the old Obama thing of, we need an all of the above approach. That's what we're going to do. And that's basically what she's saying here, right? So, and also on the Green New Deal too. Yeah, there was a time when she said, I'm in favor of the Green New Deal. Now, of course, she's not in favor of the Green New Deal, right? And so the Republicans are going to hit her on flip-flopping, and they're correct that she is flip-flopping. But what they won't tell you is, well, hold on, now Kamala agrees with us. Now Kamala is pro-fracking, and she is. And now Kamala is anti-Green New Deal, and she is. And they're not going to say, oh, way to come around to our position on that. No, because they don't actually care about the politics of it. All they care about is power. They don't care if she substantively agrees with them on these issues. And by the way, let me just point out, she said back in the day she's pro-Green New Deal and anti-fracking. Anybody who observes politics in a serious way understood back then, that's not her. No, she doesn't. She's not pro-Green New Deal and anti-fracking. Of course she's not, because she's always been a relatively centrist Democrat. And so I knew, you knew, everybody knew back then, what, really, if she becomes president, she's going to do the Green New Deal. She's going to ban fracking. Of course she's not going to do that. So anyway, what she's saying here is true, that she's pro-fracking and she's anti-Green New Deal. She's just trying to explain away the obvious flip-flop, the clear flip-flop. But her answer is basically her answer is, hey, liberals, lefties, people who are anti-fracking, you can either have me, who's both pro-fracking and I created 300,000 green energy jobs, or you could have the Republicans who will create 0 green energy jobs and they'll do even more fracking. That's basically what she's saying. Okay, now let's get to the next part. Here we go.
Another issue, big one, is immigration. As vice president, you were tasked with addressing the root causes of migration in southern countries. And
northern part of Central America.
The northern part of Central America that affects the southern border of the U.S. Mm-hmm. During the Biden-Harris administration, there were record numbers of illegal border crossings. Why did the Biden-Harris administration wait 3.5 years to implement sweeping asylum restrictions?
Okay, I already hate this question. This is the dumbest question I've ever heard in my life. It's framed from a right-wing perspective, of course, number one. Number two, the Biden administration deported more people, both as a raw number and a percentage, than Trump did. And when you hear this question, the frame is, why are you guys so lax on the border? Why has there been a record number of border crossings? Well, there's been a record surge of people coming to the border. So even though they deported more, both as a raw number and a percentage, There's just so many people coming that it's overwhelming the system, right? And then she's asking, like, basically, why didn't you ban asylum? I mean, the real answer to that has got to be, Danny, you do know asylum is a right, correct? You do know this is codified under international law, correct? And you also know that the Democrats kept in place a lot of Trump's harshest policies at the border. Remain in Mexico was in place for a very long time. Title 42, which just automatically kicked people out because of the pandemic. That was in place throughout the pandemic. God, Jesus Christ. All CNN drives me crazy. Because you're never going to hear a question framed from a left-wing perspective. It's always the conventional wisdom perspective, which in this instance is a right-wing position. All right, here we go.
During the Biden-Harris administration, there were record numbers of illegal border crossings. Why did the Biden-Harris administration wait 3.5 years to implement sweeping asylum restrictions?
Well, first of all, the root causes work that I did as vice president, that I was asked to do by the president, has actually resulted in a number of benefits, including historic investments by American businesses in that region. The number of immigrants coming from that region has actually reduced since we began that work. But I will say this, that Joe Biden and I and our administration worked with members of the United States Congress on an immigration issue that is very significant to the American people and to our security, which is the border. And through bipartisan work, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, a bill was crafted, which we supported, which I support. And Donald Trump got word of this bill that would have contributed to securing our border. And because he believes that it would not have helped him politically, he told his folks in Congress, don't put it forward. He killed the bill. A border security bill that would have put 1,500 more agents on the border. And let me tell you something, the Border Patrol endorsed the bill. And I'm sure in large part because they knew they were working around the clock, and 1,500 more agents would help them. That bill would have allowed us to increase seizures of fentanyl. Ask any community in America that has been devastated by fentanyl what passing that bill would have done to address their concern and pain that they've experienced.
So you would push that legislation again? I just want to ask
not only push it, I will make sure that it comes to my desk and I would sign it.
What she's saying here is true, and it's correct, that Trump actually has a gigantic weakness on this very issue, which is that he killed a very right-wing border bill. He claims he wants to crack down on the border. Well, James Lankford, a Republican senator, wrote a bipartisan bill to do exactly that. The Border Patrol endorsed it. Democrats were for it. And Trump killed it. Because, as Kamala points out, he thought it would hurt him politically. So, I mean, look, I have a substantive criticism. I don't think Democrats should support that bill. I hate the idea that you're basically effectively banning asylum after a certain point, a certain number of crossings. I think that's disgusting. I think that should be out of there. I think there are other parts of the bill that are kind of gross too. But having said that, you literally cannot attack the Democrats on the grounds that they're for open borders, right? And she's making clear, look, if we had our way, we would have protected the border even more, and Trump is the one who killed it. So funny enough, on the issue that is the best issue for Trump, according to the polling, he has this massive vulnerability, and she's pointing it out.
Something that you said in 2019 when you first ran, there was a debate. You raised your hand when asked whether or not the border should be decriminalized. Do you still believe that?
I believe there should be consequence. We have laws.
Imagine thinking there's even a 1% chance that she still believes that. Imagine thinking there's even a 1% chance that she still believes that. Again, look at the questions, all framed from a right-wing perspective. Every single one. And even like, you guys know this, she pretended to support Medicare for all back then. Now she's not for Medicare for all. And that's like, she immediately caves to the right-wing framing and acts like, no, I'm not in favor of that. And everybody's like, oh, okay. Like, you should defend it. You should defend it. The idea of giving everybody health care. Why would you run away from that? That's super fucking popular. Anyway.
That address and deal with people who cross our border illegally. And there should be consequence. And let's be clear, in this race, I'm the only person who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations who traffic in guns, drugs, and human beings. I'm the only person in this race who actually served a border state as Attorney General to enforce our laws. And I would enforce our laws as president going forward. I recognize the problem.
You know, what I really, really want to see, and we haven't seen this, I can't remember the last time a Democrat made these arguments, but you got to flip the narrative on the border, right? Of course, you could say the standard, I'm in favor of having a border, I'm in favor of border security, I'm in favor of legal immigration and proper rules and regulations for people to come in here. You could say all that, add every qualifier in the world. But then also you should state the obvious and be like, immigration is a net positive for the country, correct? We are a nation of immigrants. Certainly, in my experience, the overwhelming majority of immigrants truly embody the classic American ideals. The idea of like, work hard, do your best, provide for your family, get ahead the traditional way, follow the rules. Like virtually every immigrant I know is like that. This idea that like, all the immigrants are MS-13 gangsters. That's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. And in fact, there was a Cato Institute study which found that both undocumented immigrants and documented immigrants commit crime at a much lower rate than native-born Americans. So the idea, they're criminals, they're gangsters, they're this, they're that. Not true. Not true. Most of these people are incredibly hardworking, family-oriented people. And again, they are a massive net benefit to the country. Trump wants to deport over 10 million immigrants, biggest deportation in our history. And that would immediately lead to economic catastrophe. So I would love for Democrats to flip the narrative on the border and say, you know what, actually, immigration is a good thing. And we should be open to that, and we should realize that. But instead, it's, they're chasing the Republicans off that cliff on the far right.
How should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and by extension the globe around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed. So that is the reality of it. And 4 years of being vice president, I'll tell you, one of the aspects to your point is traveling the country extensively. I mean, I'm here in Georgia. I think somebody told me 17 times since I've been vice president in Georgia alone. I believe it is important to build consensus. And it is important to find a common place of understanding of where we can actually solve problems.
What she's doing here is she's trying to like marry together the criticism of, oh, you flip-flopped on the Green New Deal, you flip-flopped on Medicare for All, you flip-flopped on the border, et cetera, et cetera. And what she's saying is, yeah, my specific policy approaches to this stuff have changed, but my values underlying it have not changed. So yeah, I used to support the Green New Deal. Well, we did the Inflation Reduction Act, which had elements of the Green New Deal in it. So it's not like, I'm a totally different person with a totally different value set. It's still some of those underlying values are still there, and that's why we have the parts of the Inflation Reduction Act that include elements of the Green New Deal. It's very artful, and it's sophistry, and it's trying to marry together that she flip-flopped. Her stated position flip-flopped. And look, is she pulling it off? I got to be honest. I think in the eyes of the normie voter, yeah. I think they're watching this going, okay, fair enough. Because again, look at what she's up against. Look at who she's up against. Are people really going to nitpick every little particular about Kamala and her policy record when look at what's happening on the other side? I just think the normie voter is going to go, all right, here we go. This part's interesting to me. You
had a lot of Republican speakers at the convention. Will you appoint a Republican to your cabinet?
Yes, I would.
Anyone in mind?
I would. No one in particular in mind. We got 68 days to go with this election, so I'm not putting the cart before the horse, but I would. I think it's really important. I have spent my career inviting diversity of opinion. I think it's important to have people at the table when some of the most important decisions are being made that have different views, different experiences. And I think it would be to the benefit of the American public to have a member of my cabinet who was a Republican.
So a lot of people are pissed off by that portion. Honestly, I'm not that pissed off by it. It's one of those things where, so like take my mom, for example. registered Republican, lifelong, came from a Republican family. 2008 was the first time she voted for a Democrat, Barack Obama. And since then, she's like the classic swing voter, right? It totally votes based off of vibes, based on who she thinks is the most professional and the most reasonable and doesn't dive too much into policy. And look, I have a lot of issues with that type of voter that I'm describing right now. But the fact of the matter is, a line like this could take somebody like my mom from being like, I'm not voting for Kamala or Donald Trump. She hates Donald Trump, by the way. I'm not voting for Kamala or Donald Trump. And she hears a line like this and she'd be like, oh, well, that seems very reasonable. Maybe I'll vote for her. So it's stuff like this. Yes, it pisses off super online people like me, super online political junkies like myself, might piss off you too. But in terms of, is this going to do any damage? No. I'm sorry. Twitter lefties are going to be pissed off about it, and I understand why they're pissed off about it, but this isn't going to do any damage whatsoever. And also, she was asked the question directly, and she seemed like in real time, she was like, yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, I'll put a Republican in there. And by the way, if she were to put a Republican in, see, this is the thing. You know damn well she would pick like the most anti-Trump Republican in the world, and it would be somebody like, they would be on a special committee to investigate Donald Trump's crimes or some shit like that, right? Like, that's what we're talking about here. So I'm really not that outraged by it. Look, if I was president, I would have like a Ron Paul type in there or a Thomas Massie type in there, specifically working on like foreign policy stuff where I think my values and their values are more similar with our non-interventionist instinct. So look, doesn't really piss me off. And the devil, of course, is in the details. But the fact of the matter is, she was asked the question and she just, yeah, sure, I guess I do that. And that may have, for some swing voters, for some independents, for some fence sitters, however many remain, some moderate Republicans, if they were sort of not sure about what they were going to do, or they weren't going to vote, or maybe they'd vote their right, this could make them go, okay, all right, that's fine. And again, I'm thinking specifically of somebody like my mom, where that would land with her. It would just land with her. And she'd be like, okay, maybe I'll vote for Kamala now. So anyway, we're not done yet. Here we go.
I want to ask you about your opponent, Donald Trump. I was a little bit surprised. People might be surprised to hear that you have never interacted with him, met him face to face. That's going to change soon. But what I want to ask you about is what he said last month. He suggested that you happened to turn black recently for political purposes, questioning a core part of your identity.
Yeah.
Any?
Same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
That was literally the best possible way she could have handled that, right? The underlying implication is he's a fucking freak show, right? He's a freak show. He's a mess. If he wants to self-immolate and implode, by all means, go right ahead. But I'm not going to fucking feed into this. Now, think Hillary 2016, she would have like leaned into a super feministy, anti-racist response, right? She would have thought she'd get a lay epic own out of it. And it would have kind of fallen flat because it would have came across as so fucking forced and cringe and inauthentic. The way Kamala handled it, perfect. Just swatted it aside. She is refusing to talk about race and gender. And again, I think this is something that she picked up from Obama. I wouldn't be surprised if Obama literally directly told her, do not talk about race, do not talk about gender. The fact that you're a black woman is enough for the normie American. They don't need you to mention you're black or a woman every 7 seconds. They don't even need you to defend yourself against absurd racist and sexist attacks. Just react like this. Just swat it aside. Look, he's a chaotic agent. Anyway, next question. That's all you got to do, bro. That's all you got to do. Because honestly, I think the Trump people know they're kind of like trying to bait Kamala into her leaning into race and sex stuff. And she's not taking the bait. She's not doing it. And again, this is one of the things that worked phenomenally well for Barack Obama. Just the fact that he was a black man who was running for president and ended up winning, it drove them fucking crazy. And they came up with all the conspiracy, birtherism, and he's a Muslim, and he's a Marxist, and this and that. And they're doing the same shit against Kamala. And if your enemy's making a mistake, let him. Just step out of the way. Nailed that. All right, so that was definitely the best part of the interview. in my opinion. But now we're about to get to the worst.
About some foreign policy issues that would be on your plate if you become commander-in-chief. President Biden has tried unsuccessfully to end the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. He's been doing it for months and months, along with you. Would you do anything differently? For example, would you withhold some U.S. weapons shipments to Israel? That's what a lot of people on the progressive left want you to do.
Let me be very clear. I'm unequivocal and unwavering in my commitment to Israel's defense and its ability to defend itself. And that's not going to change. But let's take a step back. October 7, 1,200 people were massacred. Many young people who were simply attending a music festival. Women were horribly raped. As I said then, I say today, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And we have got to get a deal done. We were in Doha. Mm-hmm. We have to get a deal done. This war must end. In the meantime, and we must get a deal that is about getting the hostages out. I've met with the families of the American hostages. Let's get the hostages out. Let's get the ceasefire done.
But no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth.
No, we have to get a deal done. Dana, we have to get a deal done. When you look at the significance of this to the families, to the people who are living in that region, a deal is not only the right thing to do to end this war, but will unlock so much of what must happen next. I remain committed, since I've been on October 8, to what we must do to work toward a two-state solution, where Israel is secure, and in equal measure, the Palestinians have security and self-determination and dignity.
Okay, so let me tackle this a couple different ways. It is very clear that she memorized the specific talking point she's going to use whenever this question is asked, and she just runs through the script. You know, Israel, yeah, they have a right to defend themselves. I'm never going to back away from their right to defend themselves. They're our ally. But they also have to be very careful about how they do this war, because there's a lot of innocent civilians who are being killed and blah, 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 blah. Like, so yet again, this is the both sidesing answer. But remember, this is the best question that Dana Bash asked, because it was direct and she repeated it. It's, would you cut off weapons to Israel? Would you consider cutting off weapons to Israel? And her answer was no. That's what's behind her answer. Yes, she does the both sides rhetoric, but the answer is no, I'm not going to do that. So first of all, she brings up ceasefire. Okay. Ridiculous majority of Americans say, yes, we want a ceasefire. But also, even the cutting off weapons to Israel is a massively popular position in the country. And in the Democratic Party, again, we're what, over 60, 70, 80% in some polls? So from a policy perspective, it's the right thing to do to say, yes, I will cut off weapons to Israel. Or maybe if she just like teased it, I don't know, we'll have to see, right? If she just did that, I think that'd be enough where everybody's like, okay, but she didn't do that. She basically said, no, I'm not going to change policy vis-a-vis Israel. Well, then look, you are effectively aiding and abetting a genocide, because everybody knows, even Israeli government officials know this. The only obstacle at this moment to a ceasefire is Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the obstacle. And Joe Biden is playing this stupid game of kabuki theater, and he's pretending like, no, Netanyahu's not the obstacle. No, he is the obstacle. And even other Israeli government officials are saying he's the obstacle. Hamas has accepted a deal. We say we want a deal, but he keeps changing the terms of the deal and saying, no, I don't want to do a deal. So if you keep arming them, knowing that those weapons are going to carpet bomb innocent civilians, women and children, then you are effectively greenlighting the massacre of innocent women and children. So from a substantive perspective, God, it's incredibly immoral, it's incredibly unethical, but it's also politically dumb. And as I've pointed out before, man, look, the October surprise this year, before the election, could very well be Benjamin Netanyahu either launching an all-out attack on Hezbollah in Lebanon or launching an all-out attack on Iran. And then the U.S. would be dragged into it because we already committed. We'll jump in on your side if something pops off. And then guess what? That's an albatross around Biden's neck and your neck, Kamala Harris. And that helps Trump. And we know Netanyahu wants Trump to win. Why wouldn't he do that? He gets the war he's always wanted. The U.S. fights it for him. And He thinks that's going to help him get a Trump administration. That's what they're going to do. So for your own political ass, you have to be willing to cut off the weapons, or at least credibly threaten to cut off the weapons. If she was asked that question and she said, maybe, look, we'll see when I'm in there, I'll evaluate all the facts and where we're at that moment. And maybe, we have over 40,000 Palestinians killed, 90% civilians. At some point, we need to stop incentivizing Netanyahu killing civilians, which they're clearly doing on purpose. Maybe I'll cut off the weapons. We'll see. But no, she couldn't do it. She couldn't do it. She had to give the classic answer, went right through the script that she's brought up every time now she's interrupted by pro-Palestine protesters. These are her talking points. And look, I hate it. Now, having said all that, you guys want to know what the sad reality is? Even though I think it's morally incorrect, even though I think it's ethically and substantively incorrect, even though I think it politically could hurt her a little bit, right? The fact of the matter is, I think to most of the voters, they hear this and they go, well, it is better than Trump, right? Because at least she's saying some kind words about Palestinians. At least she's paying lip service to the two-state solution and paying lip service to self-determination for Palestinians. And she's saying far too many Palestinian civilians have died. With Trump, you get the exact opposite, where he uses Palestinian as a slur to go after Democrats and calls Chuck Schumer a Hamas agent, and has taken $100 million from Miriam Adelson under the condition he allows Israel to annex the West Bank completely. He says we need to finish the job. He mocks Democrats by saying, hey, they might cut off weapons to Israel. You believe that? I would never. So he's going to the right on it. And so I think that for most people, they look at it and go, all right, it's better than Trump. What do you want me to say? At least she's doing both sides. The thing is, to be on the pro-genocide side of the genocide is grotesque, but also to do the both sides thing on a genocide is grotesque, right? Like, those things are both hideously disgusting, right? So, oh man. Look, overall, I got to keep it real with you guys. From the perspective of the normie American voter, I think she did what she had to do in this interview. I don't think she collapsed in any way, shape, or form. I don't think she reverted back to 2020 Kamala, where she was super inauthentic and didn't know whether she was coming or going. I think she's still kind of acting with a certain swagger since she got the nod. And most of the interview was really, really, really solid. Just, of course, the worst part is on the most important issue of our time, which is the genocide. She's making crystal clear, I will continue the Biden policy of endless arming of somebody who I know is doing a genocide. Final point, she brings up the sexual violence committed on October 7th, and every time she does, it drives me crazy. First of all, there were all these initial stories that came out about systematic rape by Hamas. They fell apart under scrutiny. Even mainstream outlets realized, like, oh, okay, that's actually not totally true. And the narrative of, like, this is part of their strategy and what they do on purpose. Not true. It's just not true. It fell apart, right? But beyond that, this month, we've seen the video of IDF soldiers raping innocent Palestinian prisoners, in one instance to death, with a metal rod. And then you had these protests where Israelis went out there and argued for the right to anally rape innocent Palestinian prisoners. And then, you had this debate in the country, and the pro-rape side is winning. They made the guy who was on camera raping the Palestinian prisoner with a metal stick, they turned that guy into a celebrity and now put him on, like, Israeli talk shows. So they just pretend like, look, these depraved monsters on the Palestinian side, you believe that? When meanwhile, the reality on the ground is literally the polar opposite as we speak. Over 40,000 dead Palestinians, 90% civilian death rate, so many women and children killed, hospitals, schools, mosques, UN buildings bombed on purpose, literal concentration camps where they do 42 different kinds of torture against innocent Palestinians, rape, run-of-the-mill rape of innocent Palestinian prisoners. And what does she do? She goes out there and insists, oh, I'm for Israel's right to defend itself. They're not fucking defending themselves. They're doing Nazi shit, and we have to call a spade a spade. And she's refusing to do it on this issue. Horrible. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.